What would you sacrifice to save someone you love? When Noah Reed accepted a mysterious offer to save his mother from losing her home, he didn't know he was stepping into a gilded cage. What began as a symbolic marriage to the reclusive, powerful owner of the hotel where he worked turned into a psychological maze of debt, loyalty, control, and a form of companionship he never expected. If you enjoy stories like this, introspective, unsettling, and emotionally honest, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for more. Rain fell gently on the old rooftops of Brattleboro, Vermont, giving the small town a constant air of nostalgia. Inside the Whitmore Inn, a boutique hotel with Victorian architecture, Noah Reed watched the droplets slide down the reception window. It was the end of his shift, almost 3 in the morning. He liked the night shift. No one to smile at, no one to please, just the sound of antique clocks and the pale glow of hallway lamps. But that night, something gnawed at him from the inside. His mother, Carol, had been hospitalized for 3 weeks after a minor stroke. Her recovery was going well, but their bank account wasn't. Bills were piling up, and the mortgage on their house, the same house he grew up in, with the smell of cinnamon and burnt coffee, was about to be foreclosed. The bank had given a final deadline, 15 days, and he didn't have even a quarter of the amount. Noah had no one to turn to. His father disappeared when he was 7. Friends? He barely had time to keep any. Every cent went to his mother's medication and overdue payments. Then came the note. "Mr. Reed, please report to Mrs. Whitmore's office after your shift ends." He had never spoken to Margot Whitmore in person. She was the almost mythical figure who owned the hotel. Widow of a TV magnate, eccentric, reclusive. They said she had once been brilliant, a woman of sharp opinions and sharper looks. Now she rarely left her suite on the top floor. It was almost 4 in the morning when he went up. The door was already ajar. He knocked lightly. "Come in, Noah," said the voice, firm and measured. Margot was seated on a chaise near the lit fireplace. She wore a dark velvet robe, her face lit only by the flames. There was something theatrical about her, as if every gesture was part of a carefully choreographed performance. "I heard about your mother," she said. "I'm sorry." Noah nodded, unsure what to say. "And I also heard about the mortgage. $32,000, isn't it?" His heart sank. He had told no one at the hotel. "How did you—" "I know everything that happens under my roof. And I don't like to see good employees fall apart over things beyond their control." She placed an envelope on the table. "The debt was cleared yesterday. I bought the mortgage through a company linked to me. Your mother won't lose the house. You're free." He didn't know whether to thank her or run. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Margot smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because I believe in alliances. And you, Noah, are going to become very important to me." In that moment, he knew. There was no charity here. There was a contract. There was a price, and his had just been calculated. Chapter 2, The Proposal. The next day passed in a blur. Noah barely slept, haunted by the weight of the envelope and what it symbolized. When his shift ended the following night, he didn't go home. Instead, he found himself standing outside Margot's door again, heart pounding. The door opened before he knocked. "Punctual." "I like that," Margot said, her tone half amused, half commanding. Inside the room was unchanged, dim, warm, a theater of shadows. A dinner table was set for 2, silver cutlery, candlelight, wine already poured. She gestured for him to sit. He obeyed. "I thought it might be easier this way," she said, slicing a piece of salmon with surgical precision. "To talk, when we're not standing across a desk." Noah barely touched his food. "You're uncomfortable," she noted. He nodded. "I don't understand what you want." Margot set her fork down, folded her hands. "I want companionship, Noah, not the illusion of service, not fleeting admiration. I want someone who is present, steady, loyal. And in exchange," he said slowly, "you paid off my mother's debt." "Yes." Her gaze was unwavering. "I don't believe in charity. I believe in transactions, but not all debts are financial." He stiffened. "I'm not asking you to love me," she added, "just to be with me. In a way that feels real. Appearances can be arranged later." "A relationship," he said. "A symbolic marriage," she corrected. "You'll live in the East Wing, we'll dine together, attend functions together, you'll accompany me in private. There will be intimacy when desired." Noah couldn't breathe. "And if I say no?" Margot leaned back. "Then the mortgage is sold back to the bank, with penalties, immediate foreclosure." It wasn't a threat, it was a mechanism. Cold, legal, final. He looked at her across the candlelight and for the first time didn't see power. He saw loneliness. Terrifying, manipulative loneliness. Noah nodded once. Okay. Margot smiled. Good. Then we'll begin the arrangements. The ceremony is Friday. Ceremony? Symbolic, of course. But I want it to feel official. He swallowed. The salmon tasted like ash in his mouth. Chapter 3, The Private Ceremony. The ceremony took place in the East Wing, behind heavy oak doors that rarely opened. Margot had decorated the space with antique lace, white lilies, and candlelight that flickered like nervous glances. There were no guests, no music, no vows, just the two of them, and a retired judge she had on retainer for discreet affairs. Noah wore a dark suit that Margot had tailored for him. She wore ivory silk and pearls, her makeup subdued, her hair set in deliberate waves. She looked both regal and fragile, like porcelain that might crack under a wrong touch. The judge spoke for 5 minutes, using vague language about trust, loyalty, and companionship. He didn't ask if they loved each other. He didn't have to. When it ended, Margot reached out and slid a ring onto Noah's finger. It was vintage, likely valuable, cold against his skin. He did the same, hesitating only for a moment before touching her hand, thin, soft, slightly trembling. Margot smiled. Now it's official, she whispered. There was no reception. Instead, she led him to her quarters, a suite filled with low light and the scent of lavender. On the table was a bottle of champagne and a single slice of chocolate cake. Tradition, she said, sitting beside him. Noah drank the champagne. One glass, then another. She watched him with unreadable eyes. When she placed her hand over his, he didn't pull away. That night, he lay beside her in the wide bed, staring at the ceiling. She slept quietly, one hand resting on his chest. He didn't sleep. He didn't move. He just counted the hours until morning. The symbolic wedding was complete, and something inside him had quietly died. Chapter 4, The Nightly Routine. The days that followed settled into a pattern that felt more like a ritual than a life. Noah moved into the East Wing, a place once reserved for honored guests, and now transformed into Margot's private realm. Everything had a place. Everything was quiet. There were no clocks. Every evening at 6, they dined together. The meals were prepared by a personal chef, but it was Margot who chose the menu, the music, the wine. She treated every dinner like a stage, her words careful, her tone composed. Noah played his part. She asked him about books, about memories, never about dreams. At night, they shared the same bed. Sometimes she talked until she fell asleep. Other times she said nothing at all. Noah rarely spoke unless prompted. He felt like a stranger in a well-lit museum, forbidden to touch anything but expected to smile. He kept a small notebook hidden in the back of a drawer. In it, he wrote only numbers, amounts he would need to repay, timelines, margins. It became his form of prayer. One night, as she rested her head on his shoulder, Margot whispered, "You make the silence bearable." Noah didn't reply. He didn't have the heart to tell her that to him, the silence was unbearable, not because it was empty, but because it was filled with her. She began introducing subtle changes. A new wardrobe awaited him one morning, laid out on the bed. Tailored shirts, dark slacks, soft cashmere. "You represent something now," she said, brushing imaginary lint from his collar. He had no say in it. He no longer walked through the lobby. He entered through the garden door, a path trimmed and quiet, invisible to guests. Margot wanted no questions, no gossip. Their life, as she put it, was private, sacred. Every Friday, she arranged what she called evenings of reflection. They would sit in the conservatory, drink herbal tea, and listen to old records. Sometimes she would cry without explaining why. Noah learned to offer his hand and nothing else. She began giving him gifts, an engraved pen, a rare book of poetry, a watch she claimed belonged to her late husband. Each object came with a story. Each story ended with the same line, "And now it's yours." He kept them all in a drawer he never opened. One afternoon, a staff member named Lydia, a housekeeper who had been at the inn for over a decade, caught Noah in the corridor and asked if he was all right. He looked at her for a moment, then said, "Yes," and kept walking. But that night, in bed, when Margot asked if he was cold, he lied and said yes, just to feel the extra blanket she pulled over him. It wasn't love. It wasn't hate. It was surrender, dressed in velvet and ritual. And he was starting to forget what real freedom felt like. Chapter 5, The Legal Trap. The moment came quietly, slipped into a morning like any other. Margot was at her writing desk in the East Wing parlor, reading the newspaper, her glasses perched low on her nose. Noah had just poured her tea when she said without looking up, "I need you to sign something." He paused, cup still in hand. "What is it?" "A simple acknowledgement," she replied, "that you understand the terms of our arrangement." He sat down slowly. She handed him a manila envelope. Inside, a legal document, 5 pages, typed with highlighted sections. The language was careful, distant, clinical. The core of it, Margot now held full legal rights over the mortgage. She hadn't just paid the debt. She had bought it. The property deed listed a holding company under her name. Any breach of their understanding would trigger a clause for immediate repayment with interest. "It's just paperwork," she said calmly, "to make sure we both feel secure." Noah stared at the lines, the signatures already in place. Her lawyers, the notaries. His was the only blank left. "If I refuse?" he asked. Margot took a sip of tea, then looked him in the eye. "Then your mother's home goes to auction next month. That's not a threat, Noah. It's just what happens when things are left unresolved." He didn't sign right away. He took the envelope, walked out to the garden path, and sat beneath the maple tree where he used to read during breaks. The paper trembled in his hands. He thought about Carol, still recovering, unaware of what he'd done to save her. He thought about the home they had nearly lost, and about Margot, watching him now, perhaps from a window high above. He signed. That night, he stood beside Margot at a charity dinner she hosted for the town's Preservation Society. She introduced him as my partner. People smiled. Some nodded with veiled surprise. Others avoided eye contact altogether. The weight of the pen still lingered in his fingers. Back in their suite, Margot kissed his cheek. "Now we're truly protected," she said. He smiled faintly. "Yes," he whispered, "protected." But inside, something new had settled in him. A quiet rage, a cold resolve. He now understood what she had done. She hadn't saved him. She had bought him, and he would find a way to buy himself back. Chapter 6. The Plan. It began with a password. Noah had never touched the financial systems at the Whitmore Inn, but he had listened to passing conversations between managers, to idle complaints from the accounting team, and now he started asking casual questions about software, about access, about backup routines. "Just curious," he said. "I want to understand the business better." Margot seemed pleased. "That's my husband," she said one morning, pouring his coffee with a smug smile. "Taking interest." The hotel's internal network wasn't overly complex. Noah found a login left open on a shared terminal in the back office. From there, he traced how invoices were processed, how vendor payments were approved. The systems were old. Loopholes existed. His first attempt was minor. He rerouted a $300 linen supplier payment into a dormant account he'd opened in his mother's name before her stroke. A test. It went unnoticed. For days, he waited for questions. None came. So he continued. $500 for a landscaping service that had ceased operations. $1,200 for a fire inspection that hadn't happened. Each transaction spaced weeks apart. Each amount modest. Enough to blend in. He became meticulous. Late at night, while Margot slept, he would get up, slip into the hallway, and use the staff computer in the supply room. He memorized patterns, deleted logs, rewrote trails. By spring, he had siphoned over $10,000. And still, no one noticed. But the money wasn't just for paying back the mortgage. That would have been simple. Noah was building something else, an escape fund, a new life fund. One day, Margot mentioned a vacation. "We should take a week in Italy," she said, tracing her finger along a travel magazine. "Rome, Florence, just us." Noah felt his stomach turn. "That sounds nice," he said automatically. She looked at him then deeply. "You're with me, aren't you?" "Yes," he lied. That night, he moved another $700. It wasn't greed. It wasn't vengeance. It was air. Every stolen dollar felt like breath returning to his lungs. He knew it couldn't last forever, but for now he was careful, strategic, invisible, and if Margot suspected anything, she didn't show it, which only made him more cautious and more determined. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted to be free. Chapter 7. The Suspicion. It started with a glance. One morning, while Noah was reading in the conservatory, Margot entered without her usual theatrical grace. Her eyes lingered on him a little too long, and her smile was slower to arrive. "Have you been sleeping well?" she asked, casual but sharp. Noah looked up from his book, nodded. Of course. She sat beside him, too close. You've seemed distant. He forced a chuckle. Just tired. The season's been busy. Margot didn't respond immediately. She picked at the edge of her silk sleeve, her eyes still on him. Then, abruptly, she stood and left the room. That afternoon, he found the staff computer in the supply room had been moved. A new lock installed on the door, a new password required for access. He didn't panic, but he felt the shift. Margot had noticed something, maybe not the theft, but the change in his energy, the quiet distancing. She had always been perceptive, especially when it came to people slipping away. At dinner, she was quiet. She didn't ask about his day. She didn't smile. Instead, she brought out an old photograph, her and her late husband on their wedding day. She placed it between them. He was a man of loyalty, she said. I always admired that. Noah studied the image. The man looked stern, trapped. Is that what you want from me? He asked. I want honesty, she replied. I want presence. Later that night, she asked him to hold her until she fell asleep. Her body felt colder than usual, her breath slower. Noah lay still, heart racing, thoughts spiraling. In the morning, he noticed something else. The drawer where he kept his notebook had been slightly ajar. He hadn't left it that way. She was watching him now. Not openly, but with precision, a misplaced glance. A question that hinted at knowledge. The way her tone changed whenever money was mentioned. Noah began leaving fewer traces. He slowed the transfers, skipped weeks, erased evidence more thoroughly. But the damage had been done. The room was no longer safe. And Margot's affection, once suffocating, had turned surgical. She wasn't asking for his love anymore. She was calculating his loyalty. And he knew what came next if he failed that calculation. Chapter 8, The Confrontation. It came on a Wednesday. The air was heavy, clouds low over the Vermont hills, and Margot had canceled their dinner. Not feeling well, she had said. But when Noah returned from a walk in the garden, she was waiting in the library. She was seated in the high-backed chair by the fire, a file folder in her lap. Noah, she said without warmth, sit. He obeyed, his throat tightening. She opened the folder slowly, deliberately. Inside were printed transaction logs, statements, and 2 photographs, one of him entering the supply room at night, another of a bank deposit slip. I had the system reviewed, she said calmly. There were inconsistencies, small ones. But you know me, I notice patterns. Noah tried to speak, but she raised a hand. I trusted you, she said. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just hoped you'd grow into something honest, something different. He felt his chest tighten. I didn't take much. I was going to fix it. You betrayed me, she interrupted, after everything I gave you. Noah stood. You didn't give. You purchased. You trapped me in a life I never chose. Margot's eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked tired, ancient, but then she straightened. I could go to the police. I could take your mother's house. You know I have the power. Silence stretched between them. But I won't, she added, because despite all of it, I still care. He looked at her unsure if it was a final manipulation or the last truth she had. I'll stop, he said. No more lies, but I need space, autonomy. She closed the folder. You want freedom? I want my dignity back. Margot nodded once slowly. Then earn it. No more stealing, no more secrets. If you're going to stay, it'll be by choice. He hesitated, then nodded. That night he returned to the East Wing with a blank notebook. The old one, he burned in the fireplace. He didn't know if she truly forgave him or if she simply didn't want to be alone again. But for now, the war between them had turned into a quiet truce. One built on fragile truths and the cost of what they both refused to admit, that somewhere in all the twisted rituals, they had started to need each other. And neither one knew how to live without the arrangement anymore. Chapter 9, The End of Winter. The snow melted slowly that year. By March, the edges of the garden began to reappear, wet, uneven patches of soil that smelled of thaw and old roots. Noah found himself spending more time outdoors, pruning shrubs that didn't belong to him, raking pathways that no one walked. Margot watched him from the window. She didn't interrupt. They no longer spoke about the confrontation. It had happened, and now they lived around it, like a crack in glass that didn't quite shatter. Their routine softened. She stopped correcting his clothes. He stopped faking his smiles. Some nights they dined in silence. Other nights she read aloud from books they both pretended to enjoy. There was no intimacy, but there was presence. One evening she handed him a letter. My will, she said. I revised it. He hesitated before opening it. Inside, a single sentence stood out. To Noah Reed, I leave the Whitmore Inn, in gratitude for his quiet loyalty. He looked up. Why would you give this to me? Margot's eyes didn't flinch. Because you've earned it, and because I'm not immortal. He didn't know what to say. Thank you felt wrong. So he nodded, folded the paper, and tucked it into his jacket without ceremony. April arrived with rains, and Margot began coughing more often, a deep, wet sound that lingered. She refused to see doctors. I've lived long enough on appointments, she said. Let me rest. By May, she rarely left her bed. Noah stayed close, reading beside her, sometimes just sitting in silence. She spoke little. When she did, it was often fragments of her past, names he didn't know, regrets she mumbled like prayers. One morning, he found her asleep, hand resting on the quilt. He sat beside her, watching the rise and fall of her chest. She never woke up. The funeral was private. Her lawyer arranged everything. Noah stood alone beneath a gray sky, the only mourner at a grave that seemed too small for the weight she had carried. Weeks later, the final documents arrived. The hotel was his. He walked its halls in silence, touching walls she once ruled, lights she once dimmed. He didn't sell it. He didn't renovate. He kept it running exactly as she left it. And some nights, when he stood in the East Wing, he swore he could still hear her voice, low, amused, always watching. She died believing he had loved her. And maybe in some distorted, broken way, part of him had. Chapter 10. The quiet inheritance. Summer came slow to Brattleboro. The days stretched longer, but the warmth felt muted inside the Whitmore Inn. Noah kept the routines, the rooms, the staff, everything as it had been. He even kept Margot's perfume bottle on the vanity in the East Wing, though he never touched it. Guests came and went, unaware of the history behind the polished floors and velvet drapes. They smiled, complimented the service, and praised the sense of timelessness. Noah nodded politely. He had become part of the furniture, seen, functional, emotionless. Some evenings he sat on the same bench in the garden, watching the light fade through ivy-covered trellises. A few times he tried to write, about her, about himself, about what they had been, but the words never settled. They felt dishonest. He paid off the rest of the mortgage quietly. The deed was transferred to his mother's name. She never asked how he had done it. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe she had always suspected. One Sunday, while sorting through the old file cabinet in the library, Noah found a sealed envelope marked with his name. Inside, a single page in Margot's handwriting. If I am gone and you are reading this, then you stayed. And for that, thank you. Whatever you felt, or didn't, I saw you. I knew. And still, I chose to believe in the version of us that made sense to me. Maybe that's what all of this was, a story I needed to tell myself. He folded the letter, pressed it between the pages of a book on her shelf, and walked outside. The sky was overcast, a breeze tugging gently at the curtains. The hotel remained. The silence remained. Noah did not love Margot, not in the way she had hoped, but he had stayed, and she, in her own way, had left him with more than walls and furniture. She had left him with a question he would carry for the rest of his life. What is the price of being needed? And had he paid it or collected it? If this story moved you, made you reflect, or left you in silence, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories like this, intimate, unsettling, deeply human, waiting to be told.